Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Newton.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing fantastic.
Well, you look like you're doing fantastic, so that's a very, very good sign. May I ask you please to tell us your name?
Yes, my name is Lancelot Gooden.
Excellent. What an interesting name. Is there something to that name? Is there a story behind that?
Yes, I was born and raised in Jamaica, so it's actually Lancelot Arthur Gooden. So Jamaica's a British colony.
Right.
Um, so it's a unique name, and I love it. And I've learned to embrace my name over time.
I love it too. It's beautiful. That's really great. It's very ingenious of your parents to name you that. That's pretty good.
Absolutely.
And will you share a little bit about yourself? Anything you feel comfortable sharing?
Yes, absolutely. I can share a little bit about my background of, born and raised and grew up in Jamaica, and parents who have been really strong advocates and for education. And my mom, my late mom, who was an educator, principal, and my dad, with strong values and a strong supervisory and leadership experiences. But grew up in a very large family who were very diverse in terms of skill sets and rich educational background as well. And I think that has really driven me into educational field and into teaching from very early stages. I've also have a long history with running track and field, and that has also created opportunities for me to come to the United States. And I've attended historical college university, which is St. Augustine's University, and that attended there in a track and field and academic scholarship. So that created tremendous opportunities to pursue a bachelor's degree, which I possess in mathematics, and that also led me into teaching secondary math in Johnson County schools for quite some time. And from
That's
there,
wonderful.
yeah, it was wonderful. And that, all the connected me with the Johnson Community College, where I was prior to coming to Durham Tech. I taught there, worked at Johnson Community College for over 16 years, teaching various math courses, and also ended my last 5 or 6 years as a department chair over several programs. But, my work, when I look at my history and upbringing, my work has really been just commitment to serve, right? And, as I learned more and grew as an educator, is recognizing their populations or disadvantaged and advantaged populations. And it's important that we, I would say, channel our efforts for those who are disadvantaged and make sure that, the work isn't always fair, but the reality is, populations, groups that are underserved, underrepresented, marginalized, minoritized, are receiving the support and services that they can provide opportunities as those from advantaged populations and those who are overrepresented in certain fields. And the work I do here at Durham Tech aligns well with the mission and vision and strategic priority, as well as our equity action plan, and is really creating opportunities for social and economic and upward mobility. And that's vital now, I think, in our economy.
Excellent. So first I want to ask you about being a Black man in education. So you are a rarity, right? So maybe in historically Black colleges, there are more Black men and brown men as professors and instructors, but typically that is an outlier, not necessarily the rule everywhere else. And I start that by saying my husband is a third grade teacher. He teaches third grade here in Durham, and he's sometimes the only Black man in the building besides the janitor. So, that's a very interesting thing to see a Black man in education, and your role and what you've done over your career has got to be inspiring and to serve as a platform for young Black boys, brown boys looking for an example of where to go and how to lead. Do you believe that the lack of Black and brown men in leadership roles and education and the ability to make change really matters? Because there's a lot of people who said it doesn't matter who teaches a child, it doesn't make any difference who's in front of them as long as they're good at what they do.
It does matter.
It does matter.
And I have several stories to attest to that. For time, I'll only share one or two. But for me, I had similar experiences teaching from middle school years as being one of the only Black males um, teachers, especially in the STEM field, and then other Black employees at the school were janitors.
Right.
So it's important, if we truly believe that Black males should aspire to achieve what do they want to achieve, it's important that they see someone who looks like them and also with similar backgrounds, and that gets more complex, who also have achieved those things, and that's really vital. So it is extremely important, and I've always been aware of that as my role at various levels, at educational sectors, and really create a sense of awareness of my surroundings and environment, and recognize that over the decades I've been in education, not much has changed.
Right. Exactly. Not much has changed.
Mhm.
And, we see and hear a lot of statistics about Black and brown students and their performance in education. And I think that if you look back historically, going back to slavery and even Jim Crow, we saw where Black people were teaching themselves. So they had Black instructors, male or female, coming to homes or creating small little places or whatever these separate but unequal gave us, to teach. Black children, brown children did better than they do in the traditional system now. And would you agree that public school nationwide has moved more to a Black and brown student population than a more integrated population as it was early in, right after Brown versus Board of Education? That would you agree that that population has shifted some to the point that Black and brown students are now the majority of students in public education?
Absolutely, and several national data sources support that, Dr. Newton. So
Right.
that has shifted significantly, and that should raise even more awareness that with that significant shift in the Black and brown population in our public schools, our practices haven't changed at least at that rate.
And do you also subscribe to the fact that maybe the reason that the economics of education is the way it is because the population has shifted? In other words, cutting budgets, kids not having books, you got a whole, myriad of things of why students don't have resources. But those resources, you make children go to school starting at kindergarten and you go through 12th grade, and then you don't provide adequate resources for them to succeed, and then you highlight that they're not succeeding. Like, is that directly related to the economics of public education, or is it a combination of other factors?
I think it does speaks to the economics of education, and putting that the onus of the responsibility on the students, and also a combination of a variety of other factors, because with the economics of education, that also limits at times the ability for teachers to provide those supports for students. And not that it's an excuse, because then providing the additional supports for the leaders and teachers at our schools, we can also be more creative and innovative in the ways we try to serve, and intentional in how we serve a diverse population of students.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question. So over the years, as you look at the way education has changed and not changed, so we're still on the agrarian calendar, we still have all these mandatory days, although the results don't always bear out the work that we're doing. So in education, you've got kids going to school, and you've got a percentage of them that are not going to do well, and the system doesn't even catch them until it's too late. And then the other part of that is the system is set for teachers are often as disadvantaged as the students are in a lot of cases, right? They're working more than 8 hours a day. They're bringing in their own resources. They've got meetings and all these other things they've got to go to all on their own time, which no other employment factor allows that. If you work a full-time job and you work, 7.5 hours, you get a 30-minute break, you get lunch, you get a 15-minute break, you get a 30-minute lunch. Teachers don't get that. I have heard so many stories of people, like they don't get to go to the bathroom until the end of the day because there's no time in the calendar for that. I mean, does that hurt the students? And is there a way to fix that?
Absolutely, Dr. Newton. over my years, I've, coming in, I would sing back in 2002 in the public school system, especially North Carolina. I believe I was at somewhere at the beginning of that accountability phase, right? And I think the emphasis on accountability, which is not a bad thing, we all should be held accountable, provide standards so we can meet and improve. And a data-driven approach to the work we're doing is important, but that emphasis has put so much on teachers over time has shifted our focus from the core responsibilities of teachers, and is to provide exceptional education to our learners. And when it's so much administrative role and accountability, then we're inherently that process and system has failed our students and the mission of what we're intended to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move to higher education. So there's so much I could say about this, but I really want to get your sense about how you see higher education, specifically for Black and Brown students. So I'll give you a couple of small examples. I worked at Duke Law for a number of years. I don't know how many, 13, 14 years, something like that. And what I often saw is Duke admits a very small number of Black students. I'm not going to talk about Brown right now, but Black students. So when I first got to Duke, and I think I got there in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, I think there were 3 or 4 in the law school, in a cohort, of a couple hundred. And then it grew over time, but the number never reached, say, 50 or, something like that. It's always a small percentage. And those students, many of those students struggled at a historically white college, being an elite college, being a college where the criteria for admission is very high. Majority of the students are merit-based, not need-based students, finding themselves, even though they're very smart, they came from very great backgrounds, they were top of their class at their colleges undergrad, but then they get there and they don't find themselves belonging, or they don't find a place for them there. And so they tend to go back to that old book, why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? Because they learn to rely on each other for success. So in a school like Durham Tech, so your school applies more to people who work and are adults, have multiple lives, whereas college is not their full-time thing. That's not all they're doing, is going to college in many cases. Do you think that it is really different for Black students coming into higher ed than it was, say, when Black kids could only go to historically Black colleges, where they could only go? Do you think the quality and the type of education they receive is equal to that of a historically Black college? Or do you think that there is balance and some room for opportunity to go to a predominantly white or an elite school versus going to a historically Black college? And I have a follow-on question to that.
It is different, because I went to a historically Black college. I mean, an undergraduate from St. Augustine's College, a master's from Campbell University, and finished my doctorate at NC State University. And I'm grateful for the experience I had at St. Augustine's University, and how the support, intentionality of the support, and seeing more leaders like me in various roles, how that it inspired me to want to achieve more, to work harder, to connect with all my instructors. It happened authentically.
Right.
In other experiences, from my lived experience, it wasn't authentic, and that created challenges. But in my belief, I believe that every individual has the capacity to learn, grow. And I think what I acquired at St. Augustine's University, as for historical Black university, that gave me what I needed to overcome any challenges moving onward. And also my upbringing.
Right.
So it hasn't been authentic in serving, access is there. I mean, they would say access, but access, there are challenges in access too, right? I still believe that because of, being a Black male or person of color, there are challenges in access and support and the kinds of resources that were available to us at historically white institutions.
Yeah. I do want to challenge you on that, persons of color. I do not subscribe to that, because that gives the majority an advantage for us to be persons of color. And the way I see it, we're all of color, white, Black, blue, brown, wherever you come from, we're all of color. If we use a designation to describe or marginalize a group, i.e. persons and people of color, we're doing that to give another group an advantage. So I don't subscribe to persons of color. I don't believe that I'm a person of color other than I am Black. And the person that lived next door to me is white, so she's a person of color too. So I just want to say that. But I want to go back to the thing. So ESPN has this program called College Football 150 Years or something like that. I forgot the exact title of it. And there was one of the shows was integration. And William Broden, I believe is his name, talked about what integration meant to historically Black colleges and football, right? So all of these great talents who had played at historically Black colleges now left and went to predominantly white colleges because they were lured away with more and more and more and more. And maybe because you're playing a sport, you're in a fraternity or a sorority of people that kind of keeps you grounded and makes you feel connected. But going to a historically Black college, so like you, I have 3 degrees from North Carolina Central. I have a doctorate degree from East Carolina. And my experiences at Central and East Carolina are day and night. Like you said, I felt like I belonged. It felt organic. People cared about me. I had a name. I wasn't a number. If my grade slipped or I didn't do something right, there was someone always on top of me, calling me, whatever. And you may see I have on a shoulder sleeve. In 2009, I tore my rotator cuff, and that was the end. So I had been out of, 2003, I tore my rotator cuff. I had been out of school. So I had graduated. I got all my undergraduate degrees, and I was working on my master's program at Central. When I went through the surgery and I went through the processes that I had to go through to get back together, I took my schoolwork at home. My instructors, a couple of them came to see me. They cooked for me. That never happened at East Carolina. No matter what I was going through at East Carolina, I was whatever that number is that they give me in banner, and that's who I was. And because I'm old school, and I'm older, so in a few days I'll be more than 19. But to me, that piece of belonging, as like you said, it gave me the path to go anywhere I wanted to go. I felt strong. I didn't feel insecure. I had confidence. I had a thought that I could be anything, and there were people who were going to support me. And then I came back to the real world where I was reminded that I didn't matter. But using the ESPN thing, do you think that integration was a good or a bad thing? And I'm not asking it in a negative context. I'm asking, like, are our students who go to historically Black colleges getting a better education than if they were going to an elite top 10 school? Is there some variation in those two types of learning?
There is definitely variation, and it depends on how one views education, right? You do have views in terms of elitist college versus those that are not. But when you think about what you provide that individual so they can aspire to be what they want to be and overcome the challenges that lie ahead, for a Black male like myself, attending a historically Black institution provided what I need. I don't think I would have gotten that at a historically white institution had I gone there for undergraduate degree.
Absolutely.
So my education was in fact better.
Excellent. So now I want to go back to public school. So public schools have been, I know they have charter schools, and I can't remember what the other kind of things they create, but there are these schools that cater to special groups, or, are different than typical government supported public schools. So do you believe integration for K-12 students, Black and brown K-12 students, have been to their advantage?
With the knowledge I have of the K-12 system, not as a student, but from a teacher perspective, um, in instances, I would say no, not to their advantage, because when you think about income disparities in the communities and how that impacts the resources available in certain K-12 systems, no, it's to their disadvantage, and that is problematic, and it should not be that way. I think that speaks to a bigger issue, a systemic issue, I suppose. That I mean, it's obvious, but has not truly been addressed.
Right. So we'll leave education alone. We beat it up enough today, so we'll leave education alone. So I want to talk about the workforce. So my company and the work I do is in the diversity and inclusion space. And I do a lot of work. And I almost feel like people take advantage of me because I'm the person everybody comes to when they have a diversity question or problem, whether it's a big company, a small group, whatever it is. I feel like I'm drawn in. And so a part of that was the reason why I started my company. But the workforce today, so if you walk anywhere in almost any city, there are signs that we're hiring. And this is even in strong careers, like so STEM careers, accounting, financial management, all of these all have vacancies. A part of the process with what we look like pre-COVID, Black and brown people were hired into organizations and they become like a paperweight. They're there. They have these tasks that they're responsible for, but they're really recognized, really promoted, and most importantly, rarely, if ever, paid fairly. I'll give you an example. There was an employee at where I worked, a Black man, and brilliant. I mean, simply brilliant. Young guy, probably late 20s, early 30s, brilliant. And he worked in a predominantly white department. I think he was the only Black person, no brown either, the only Black person in that department. And he had asked and asked and asked and asked for things, like to be paid more, to do different things, to work on projects, all of these things. And it didn't happen. And so he left. That asset that they lost was probably more valuable than other things that they considered to be valuable. So in the public workforce, why is it that it is hard for companies to recognize Black and brown people for the value that they bring? And I want to give you one more example. Fidelity. Fidelity is probably one of the largest stock companies out there. They have a location here in RTP. If you go out there, if you go for a visit, the number of Indians almost equal the number of whites. Now, that's not the same thing for other Black and brown people, but even in that instance, these people become warehoused, right? So they're the paperweight too. So they hire them so they can check off the diversity box, right? We've got these people, we hire them, we pay them some wage, but they get stuck in that too. Why is it that the workplace has not recognized the value of Black and brown people in the workplace and paying them fairly and recognizing what they bring to the table? I know that's a hard question.
It is a hard question, and my work of the past 2 years have been really working with different employers and getting a better sense of the reason for the gap, right, in the workforce in the Black and brown population, and the lack thereof of enough leaders, right? A high proportion of Black and brown leaders in our workforce. And it is concerning. I think it goes back to just, our history in our country. It's hard not to speak to that. I mean, when you see where we are and the challenges we face, and recognize, and also, it speaks also to deficit-minded thinking, um, and oppression. And it's hard, it's hard to process and to think about it if it's intentional, right? And it's hard not to say it isn't. You understand the workforce, their skills, they say there's a growing skills gap, but we have back to what we spoke earlier, a increase in Black and brown population.
Right.
We have a growing population who are just as capable, and we ought to believe that. Then why is there a gap? So we're perpetuating, the system is perpetuating that problem and not truly trying to find a solution.
Right.
And that is problematic. So, speaking to your question, it feels like it's intentional, and this is this time where employers recognize that Black and brown populations are just as capable, and if it means we need more Black and brown leaders, which we should, to really challenge this belief and move our population out of oppression. And that's what it's going to take. Otherwise, it creates a greater problem, and is really our workforce and our livelihood from that perspective.
So you probably remember in 2015 when Google released its facial recognition software.
Yes.
So I would bet anything they did not do that intentionally, but that's one of the drawbacks of having sameness. Everybody there looks alike, thinks alike, believes alike. So to create this facial recognition software, they had people who probably didn't have much experience with Black and brown people, didn't go around Black and brown people. So it was easy for them to allow the algorithm to find, and the code actually did not code to put up the gorilla. The algorithm searched for the machine learning piece of it, searched for what it thought it saw. Mm-hmm. So when it saw a Black or brown person of a certain hue, it put up a picture of a gorilla. This is why the workforce needs to be more diverse, and not just by ethnicity, but by people, where people work, what people do, their experiences they bring to the games. All of that needs to be rethought. The other part of that is so as of 2017, I haven't seen any new recent data. I do know that this is talked about a lot. For every dollar a white man makes, a Black man makes 59 cents. Black woman, 57 cents. White woman, 79 cents. A brown person, and depending on the kind of brown, so Asian brown, Asian, Chinese, or Japanese makes more than the white man. Asian something else, they kind of fall in there in something else. The fact that the HR system, so, I don't know if you hire, but let's just say you have a job opening in your department and you get someone. Most organizations are trying to manage their budgets, right? And the majority of an organization's budgets is always personnel. It's the largest part of the budget, right? So it's personnel. So they're always trying to manage their budgets and make sure that that's in some sort of control. But if you're hiring a brand new person into your organization, the person comes with the skills and education and the expectations that you have for this position, why wouldn't you pay them a fair wage? And not fair in that you're making above the poverty line, or you're making above, whatever the median income is for that kind of position. But why wouldn't you go a little further? One, to retain that person, and to keep that person from leaving you and going somewhere else, because that's the story. Early in my career, I started in IT in 1977. Every 2 years, I changed jobs. I don't care if I was in charge of I changed jobs, because that was the only way to get a raise, was to change jobs, was to leave every 2 years. So why wouldn't companies think about this from a different perspective in terms of employee retention, giving people a voice or a seat at the table? Why wouldn't these factors be considered in hiring, as opposed to just trying to manage your budget as cheaply as you can and getting people there? And typically when they cheap something, they cheap the Black and brown people.
And it goes, that's why it's so critical that, I mean, diversity should be core to, your personal agenda. It really should be. And in saying that, it's important, that goes when that's the priority, as opposed to balancing the budget, so to speak, then inherently a more diverse workforce, is more likely, to be retained. And that addresses the the budgetary issues, if that exists, right?
Right.
Because it speaks to what you mentioned, Dr. In terms of, employer retention. So that focus on diversity and retention, and that improves productivity if it goes back to the workforce or education, because you're ensuring that, the representation of the or the face of the culture, the face of the workforce is represented the face of the population that you serve, and it inherently it addresses the problem over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, I want to talk about you now. So first I want to correct something. So when I asked you earlier what your name was, you said Lancelot Gooden, but it's actually Dr. Lancelot Gooden. And I think we underserve ourselves when we don't bring that to the forefront. People always ask me, why does this say Dr. Rochelle on my Zoom or any communication you have with me? Because it was a hump to get this degree. Nobody gave it to me. Writing a dissertation is like having a child climbing Mount Everest and learning to fly all in the same time. It's a bear. So Dr. Lancelot Gooden. So I want to make sure we're on the record. And can I get you to say that for us one time? Make sure we get it clearly articulated.
Yes, and I am Dr. Lancelot Arthur Gooden.
Thank you so much for that. So tell me, what was Jamaica like? So I have been a couple of times, but of course I go to do the touristy things. So tell me what life was like growing up in Jamaica, and what's your favorite memory, favorite food, and what's the story that you want everybody to go explore when they go to Jamaica?
Oh, there's so many great memories, because I miss Jamaica so much. I wish I could travel back each month. So growing up in Jamaica has been fascinating. And I attribute that to just my family. We're very much connected, and my community, it's Vernon Field in Clarendon, southern central portion of the country. And growing up is just free, right? It is free. And maybe I was oblivious to race, or suppose, but it everything was authentic, and that was never a worry. It's very diverse culture. However, mothers out of many, we're one. So there's no black Jamaican, white Jamaican. You're just Jamaican. The food is rich, and the music is amazing. And just have a wonderful experience in our educational system. I think, going back to the leaders and educational, and just the support, intentionality of the support that it received. So that never created a barrier for me. I think that in itself, for me, was an asset coming to the United States and then going to an historical back called university. So, I would say for Jamaica, you have to try our jerk chicken. You have to try, any of the jerk recipes. Our seafood is great, but our fruits, I am telling you, the variety is amazing. So you try our mangoes or berries. So it's just a variety of amazing food, and music, which you in Jamaica would speak to, like, okay, you got to have that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people try to imitate that jerk chicken, but when I had it, there is no jerk chicken in America like that jerk chicken. There is.
There isn't. There is. When you've had it in Jamaica, you realize, oh, okay.
Exactly. Exactly. So why did you come to America? Did you come for education, or did you come because there was something you couldn't find in Jamaica?
Mhm. I would say, my athletic background. So I wanted to be a world record holder in long jump. So long jump was my event, and traditionally, back in my era, most athletes, they look forward to an opportunity to compete in the NCAA in the United States, and that level of competition, post secondary school, at the time wasn't it wasn't really prevalent in Jamaica. So to really move to the professional level, the next level is to more likely get a scholarship to a college or university to the States and compete at that level, and then move on to professional fields. So it was primarily because of my accomplishments and my aspirations to be an Olympian, if I may say. There are academic opportunities in Jamaica, and we partner with other I would say Caribbean countries, because ultimately academically I wanted to be an architect. There were engineering schools in Trinidad, and I have neighbors who completed education in Jamaica and went to universities in Trinidad, but the university in Jamaica that focuses on engineering as well, and medical fields. So for me, the driving force was the opportunity to be a professional athlete, because I did get accepted into the engineering school in Jamaica at the time with my younger brother, but also received a full track and field scholarship to St. Augustine's College University within weeks. And I chose that was my dream, to get that full scholarship.
Has that process changed over time? Because didn't so this particular Olympics, I guess, was the Summer Olympics, which was for 2020. I saw lots of people from Jamaica and all kinds of countries that were in their home country competing in the Olympics, competing at various colleges all around the United States and around the world. Has that changed from your time when you were an athlete?
Yes, that has changed tremendously. A lot of prominent athletes, and the world should know, Usain Bolt and others prior to Usain Bolt, female and male athletes, Marilyn Audi, and those have set the path. And I think I've created an infrastructure where we have more local clubs and organizations supporting that transition from high school to the professional field, or high school pursue a college degree, and also pursue opportunities for performing professionally athletically. So that has changed tremendously. Not that it didn't exist to some degree in Jamaica, it did, because I did actually, while in high school, trained at a club, associated with Jamalco at the time. But there's so many more track clubs, so much more financial support, that's also important, right? Yep. And that has really retained a lot of our local athletes, and I think what was evident now, they're outperforming the local athletes who come overseas and perform in the NCAA circuit and then move on to the professional field.
Absolutely, because didn't 2 or 3 Black women from Jamaica win gold in this previous Olympics?
Yes, they dominated sprints in the 100 per se, and that spoke again a lot to just what has established locally, because I think all 3, I don't recall if any of the 3 competed on the NCAA circuit. I don't believe they did. Okay. But that's phenomenal what they have accomplished.
Right. And that speaks to the power of staying home and using the resources there if the resources are there. So that's really wonderful. Yes. Okay. So my next question is this. So, my husband is a diehard Olympian. So he watches these things, the summer, the winter, and all that stuff. And I'm sitting there kind of saying, can't we turn the channel? So one of the things that I got to watch was the track and field, a lot of that. And so the long jump. So these people are so talented. I mean, the way they run, the way they jump, the way they levitate their bodies, it's just absolutely phenomenal. So has the long jump changed from your time to now, or is it just the athletes are faster, better, leaner? What's different? If there's anything different.
So I'm diehard track fan, but I'm a long jumper. I mean, insert my biases because of a rich history, coming up secondary school as a long jump. So from my perspective, not much has changed. The long jumpers haven't really gotten better. And I think other long jumpers will probably agree with me on that, because while they've maintained certain standards, for quite some time, the standards have dropped. Going back to the time, my time coming up was really looking at American jumpers like Carl Lewis, Mike Powell, who's a world record holder, Cuban Ivan Pedroso. You hear those names, they were jumping in meters, 8.8, 8.9 meters. And then that standard, you know, jumpers really haven't maintained that standard since then, going back to 1996 or earlier.
Mhm.
They have gone, an average 27, 28 low. And, that's still, those are good jumps, but technically they may have gotten faster. Um, it's a very technical sport. There's a lot more technology available, but really that for the long jump, that has not elevated the jumper. So there's something that's missing there.
I think you need to start coaching the long jump. I think you've got something there. You need to get on it, figure out what's going on with that.
Absolutely. I coached for a little bit. I've enjoyed coaching, but yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about, and it's my favorite event to watch at the Olympics. And that's my bias, right? Because I'm a jumper.
But I do think that where there's opportunity for improvement, if you know how, you should. And I recognize that's probably taking on a pretty large challenge because you have to dedicate yourself to the athletes and time and all that stuff. But if any way you can make someone's life better, I always say, let's do it.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you so much for chatting with me today. It has been absolutely insightful and enjoyable. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. And I hope you'll come back and talk to me again because I have lots more questions.
No, thank you. This was also enjoyable and insightful, Dr. Newton. I would love the opportunity to do it again.
Absolutely. So as I said to you earlier, I will send you a link to this once it converts. Please watch it and let me know if I can upload it. And please tell other people to come chat with me because I love to hear these stories. I love to learn, and it's just beautiful to hear these kinds of things. Okay, I'm going to turn the recording off here, and I'm going to ask you my